Hello and welcome to another episode of the Deal Flow Show. I'm JP Maroney, your host, along with my co-host, Mr. Paul Nicolini. And we've got a great guest here today. We're going to be talking about a couple of topics that have really gathered steam over the last few years. So hopefully we'll get to dive into that. We've got a great guest, Mr. Rod Turner from Manhattan Capital. And I found out that that is Manhattan Street Capital, right. And that is in San Diego, not New York. And I think, you know, Rod, I don't know if you remember, but this was back early when I was putting Harbor City together. You and I spoke briefly, and we talked. Yeah. And at that time, the Reg A's were just catching on, and you were doing the first few of them. And as I understand it, you guys have put quite a bit of water under the bridge since then. So looking forward to diving into that. But in this episode, we're going to obviously talk about some of the great fundraising opportunities and ways that deal makers out there can put capital together for their projects. We're going to talk about some things that you might be working on that you'd like to talk about, as well as we're going to ask you some questions that hopefully will dive into your storehouse of knowledge and your years of experience that will help us put together a book we're writing called Deal Makers, Deal Breakers. And it's going to be for anyone in the deal making process, all areas of the capital stack and the capital markets, as well as attorneys, service providers, people like yourself. So let's jump into the questions. Why don't you give us a little bit of background about how you got started in the capital markets?
I'm an entrepreneur, I guess we'll get into that later. I'm a serial entrepreneur. And I did a failed startup in 2011, 2012, 2013, which was focused. I've done 6 clearly successful startups, right? But unfortunately, you don't always win. This one failed, but it was intriguing in some ways. It was a neat idea. I saw that Kickstarter would only allow projects, they wouldn't allow companies, and they wouldn't allow charities. And I didn't like the arbitrary way that they were allowing and disallowing people to go live on their platform. So, and I felt that there was an opportunity to fix that. So I made start.ac, launched it, and it was, in essence, it was a neat concept, but we were starving for oxygen because they were doing what was needed. They were doing a really good job of what was needed. And even though there were lots of wonderful innovations, start.ac failed. We focused on charities and we focused on companies because they weren't allowed on Kickstarter. But, you know, donations to companies are, you know, people want to own stock, right? So it's, you know, it was always going to be a challenge. So I misread that one, but it made me pay attention to the Jobs Act because the Jobs Act was announced as I was launching the company, going live with it. Got a lot of extra coverage as a result. But, you know, then, you know, the Jobs Act was way delayed because the SEC took a long time to deliver on the promise, if you will. But I was paying attention to it the whole time. And when Reg A Plus came along, I decided, I looked at it thoroughly and I'm very impressed with it, actually. It's a very well-written set of regulations, and there's a huge need for what you can do with Reg A Plus. In my view, it's going to be $50–60 billion a year capital raise when it hits stride in, you know, in today's dollar numbers, which, you know, that's sizable compared to $160 billion a year in the IPO and secondary market space. But we'll see if I'm right or wrong. Anyway, I launched this company for that reason then, which was April of 2015, so 5 years and 4 months ago.
Excellent. Since the beginning of this, what has the evolutionary process and how do you feel the acceptance has been for Regulation A over the past, let's say, 5–6 years that it's really seemed to have started picking up steam?
Yeah, so it went live 5 years and 3 months, 2 months, 5 years and 4 months ago, right around the same time I went live with the company. We were the first dedicated Reg A Plus platform. There were other existing platforms that added Reg A Plus, but we were the first to be focused on it. Anyway, to answer your question, you know, it does take a long time for people to become aware of things, especially when they're so completely different than the old way, right? So it has taken a long time, and I would say 2019 was really the first banner year for Reg A Plus, because it was 41% up on 2018, which is a sizable growth rate year on year. And it was just over $1 billion raised in capital in Reg A Plus in 2019. And that's good. That puts it on the same level as the entire private placement business, which people know more about because it's been around for a longer time. So, that's not too shabby. We've got a long way to go with it, but I see all sorts of signs of growth this year with, even notwithstanding COVID. So, I don't know what the growth rate for the whole Reg A Plus industry is going to be this year, but we are seeing amazing companies, amazing quality companies that are such a good fit for Reg A Plus. Already Reg A Plus is such a good fit for them that this is going to be a banner year, even though we're, a large way through it, and next year is going to be superb as well. It'll be exciting to see. We're going to see the restarting of IPOs in Reg A Plus, even if it's just the ones that we're working on. That's going to, and once you get a couple of good ones out, then there'll be others that will follow. To my mind, that's a very big piece of the puzzle. Anyway, yeah, that's the short stories. It's showing signs of great life at the moment.
Rod, the Reg A platform is basically a direct-to-consumer platform. How do you see the broker-dealer community accepting the Reg A platform as well?
Like anything new, especially in industries that aren't known for their rapid adoption of new stuff, right? Insurance industry, the banking industry, I would say the capital raising industry are all relatively stuck in their ways. You get a hell of a lot of naysayers. I mean, more at the beginning. I was at the time I had a meeting in New York City. This was 2017. We were already 2 years in, and this guy that had a broker-dealer underwriter had just sold it, just got out of the business. He's telling me that it's impossible to do a Reg A Plus to the NASDAQ. He's telling me that. Well, the industry had done 4, and I had written an article for Forbes on the one that we did that closed on that Tuesday. We're meeting on Thursday. It happened, for Christ's sake. It's happening. That kind of, blocked thinking isn't unusual. So we've seen a lot of that. But the way it's working out is that broker-dealers are getting involved in pragmatic and appropriate ways, and they've been adapting to it and doing good. We have a broker-dealer that we work with that charges a 1% commission because their purpose is to allow our offerings to get into the 7 problem states that aren't cooperating with the SEC. It's a very much simpler way to get that access. And it took me 4.5 years to find a broker-dealer willing to go that low on the commission, because that's not the norm, right? So in a non-intrusive manner that doesn't interrupt the investment process for the investors either. So it's very beneficial. But there are underwriters that like Reg A Plus that have done IPOs with it that will do them again as the time comes along. That's a solid spot, and there are broker-dealers that are active in this space, some of them doing some very innovative things, surprisingly strong innovative things. Although really what I see happening mostly is that because of the public, transparent nature of these raises, most broker-dealers don't really want to get involved or won't actually add value until an offering is clearly successful. So if you imagine a $45 million Reg A Plus and it goes live with no money at all, the broker-dealer their reps don't want to risk their client reputation by going to bat when it might not ever come to pass. It might not succeed, right? It's just too early. But when you've hit on a 45 mil, whatever, 25 million at a good clip, when you've hit that it's a success story. and now it's time to go out and and solicit. So that's the time to bring them in, right? Not prior to that, and only if it's really appropriate and necessary, because their commissions add on to the already the other expenses in marketing and things. But that is when it's most appropriate in most cases to engage broker dealers, because they can add value. They can go to bat and do really well. It's certainly possible, because most of the demand is created by advertising online in large raises with companies that don't have a huge audience already. And it's certainly possible in theory to tap out the easy to reach market, right? And in that case, it's like, our cost of advertising is going up in leaps and bounds. Let's get those broker guys on board. And by the way, they really want to be involved, because this is a winning offering we're talking about right now. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Certainly broker dealers are part of that distribution formula. When the Reg A's first came out, my thought process, whether it's correct or not, I guess is to be seen, but my thought process was, if you're going direct to consumer and you're raising money direct to mom and pop investors, grandma can write a check on this one, that you were best suited if you were a consumer brand that already had a fairly large list of people who were somewhat invested in you by buying your products and services, following you, etc. But you built a platform. If you set aside the broker dealers as part of that distribution, how do the platforms like yours and others figure in and allow companies that may not fit that model I described to still be able to successfully raise with a Reg A?
The most important issue is, first, if we assume it's a valid company in a valid space, where the strategy fits and the market trends are favorable, all the usual things that you go through. If you assume all that, there's still a lot of companies that are not going to find Reg A Plus the right instrument, because they're boring or they're difficult to explain. They can be a fantastic company, but if it's too hard to explain it online and advertise it, that's not going to work, right? And although what we've evolved to is where mostly, if it's a share offering, then we want to do share offerings when they resonate with the investor audience, because it's easy to explain and people care, or they think it's a no-brainer knockout success and they want to be on that train, right? Those are two clear examples, and that works. Well, when we're selective enough, which we are, that can work very well. But there are great companies that are boring or hard to explain, where, frankly, Reg A Plus is just not the instrument, unless they're prepared to can afford to do an offering that pays a decent dividend. So then, an 8% to 10% dividend paid monthly in a Reg A Plus context. Now we're advertising the yield in a very low interest rate environment. And when the potential investors come in, they're looking to see, is the company real enough? Is it solid enough? Is the deal reliable enough that I can be in this for long enough to make it worth my while? And that works very well. So for that sort of company, early stage companies can make a reserve against every dollar they raise to pay those dividends for long enough to where they believe they'll be able to pay them from proceeds. So, that's what we also see working well when the companies are solid enough and want to take that approach, right?
Is it an either or with debt and equity, or are you seeing hybrids with convertibles and equity kickers and things like that?
Well, generally not hybrids with convertibles and kickers and things, because they're too complicated. The average Main Street investor doesn't understand that stuff. We're dealing with regular people who have some disposable income. They are generally optimists in a Reg A Plus, I'm talking here, not Reg D, obviously. They're generally optimists. In 100 people that are going to invest in a given offering, 1 or 2 of them will invest on the first visit to the offering page. So they're optimists, right? You know that. And I know that based on seeing their questions and comments. We have companies where they've said, no plans to go public, no plans for liquidity, this is this and that's that. Oops, absolutely overt. And then, 3 months into a 12-month raise, we're getting messages saying, when's the IPO? Oh, excuse me, sorry about this, but we did make it clear over here, not just in the offering circular, this yay long document, but on the offering page, you're dealing with optimists when that's happening, right? Which is nice. It's a fun thing. Almost the opposite of your average accredited investor who's cynical, understandably, lots of experience, lots of opportunities elsewhere.
When you were booking this interview, you communicated back and forth with Daniel Pinarenda, who is in our business development, or as we all call it, sales side of things. But he is a recent graduate as an aerospace engineer and chose to go into the sales side of the business. You too started in engineering, and now you're essentially in sales and marketing, deal making. I want to talk about that in just a moment. But first, if you're watching or listening to this episode of the Deal Flow Show, you can get access to our archives as well as subscribe and follow us for additional episodes or future episodes at thedealflowshow.com. All right, so our guest today is Rod Turner from Manhattan Street Capital. And Rod, my question for you related to that is, how did you migrate? How did it start with this engineering mindset and end up in sales and marketing?
I am fortunate because I believe having an engineering mind helps me greatly as an entrepreneur and CEO, because I can't just satisfy myself with seeing something and saying it works. I have to understand how and why it works, whatever it is, right? And then I learn from it and I figure out bits of it that are great that aren't being used over here, but I put them over here. People think I'm being innovative. Actually, I'm not. I'm just taking an obviously successful bit here and putting it there where it's needed. And my God, it works well. Being an engineer helps with that. And being an engineer where I've been fortunate enough to learn to sell and market and lead and recruit and hire and all the things that you have to do and raise money. And now I'm, quote, a financier. I'm still the tech guy. I happen to be in a financing business because there's tremendous need and opportunity. But my experience, I did a VC fund as well. My experience is super relevant and it helps me immensely, right? We don't go by tables and formulas and checklists and nonsense like that because we understand great companies.
Rod, so you've been involved with successful startups. You've also taken companies public. Give us some of the lessons that you've drawn from those experiences.
I am so fortunate. It's amazing. Not only in what I've been able to be doing and done, but also because I've seen so much, right? I mean, I pay attention to what's going on. I learn other people's lessons, right? I see other companies start up. Back in the day when I was at Ashton Tate, there was a phase where application software was moving to integrated software, which obviously makes sense. Microsoft Office is kind of an obvious incarnation of that today. But back in those days, in the mid 80s, it was brand new stuff. There was a company that had a marvelous brand name and a really good product concept and were venture funded. And they announced and advertised what was so fantastic. I mean, if they were able to deliver that, it was going to kick ass because it was going to be the first integrated application software productivity product, spreadsheet, word processor, database in one. Yes, very good. But the thing was, they spent all of their money in about a year and never shipped the product. Can you imagine the naivete or silliness there? How would they ever keep spending all the money on a megabuck ad campaign when things are going wrong with development? I mean, you can imagine, we can hypothesize about what went on, but it was bloody astounding. The amount of money they were spending, because, when you're doing it, you know what it costs, was insane. Anyway, that was somebody else's lesson because they blew it completely. And if it had the resemblance, if it had the makings of a success, they burned their bridges so thoroughly, there was no way they could keep it going.
What I was sitting here thinking as you were going through some of that is one of the episodes that we have in season 1 is with Kevin Harrington. and he just came out with a book, Mentor to Millions, and we were talking about the power of tapping into someone else's knowledge, and clearly you've got a lot of knowledge. I tell people as you've got information that's hammered out on the anvil of experience. And my guess would be people who work with Manhattan Street Capital, in addition to all the mechanics and the platform and everything else, get to tap into that storehouse of knowledge as you serve them. And so I want to come back and talk about people and let you ask your question. But before we do, if you're watching or listening to this episode of the Deal Flow Show, you can get access to our archives as well as subscribe or follow us to get access to future episodes at thedealflowshow.com.
Rod, we'd like to know, what kind of people would you like to connect with from our audience and our potential guests that we've had on the show?
Well, you bet. Let me just say one more thing that follows what you just said there, right? Because precisely what you said I am doing, and I'm having a blast. We are in a regulated space. It's a little boring, right? All these regulations, you read through them, it's like, oh my God, I'll get some coffee and come back. It's so dilute, it's so heavy. I am making innovations in this regulated space, doing things that are allowed, but no one else is thinking of. It's a fantastic experience. This suit, I mean, I have this desire to succeed, to kick ass, to excel. That's always there. That sort of defines who I am. And doing it in a regulated environment, sometimes I'll yell out because it's like, yes, I found a way to do something really cool, really valuable in the selling and marketing of securities that is legit. That nobody else has come up with this because it's so bloody perverse, but I figured it out. And I've had a few of those, and I'm continuing to do that. So yeah, it's fun, and our clients obviously get to benefit from that. But that's not what this call is about. But that's fun. Who would have guessed in a regulated environment that there could be fun experiences or discoveries made in the regulatory, within the regulations. It's astounding. We're doing stuff no one else can figure out, where the barrier to entry is, oh my God, is that even allowed? How's that allowed?
Rod, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to connect?
Send me an email at Rod Turner, so that's Rod like Rod Stewart, Turner like Tina Turner, at manhattanstreetcapital.com, spelled exactly how it sounds.
Excellent. On behalf of Paul Nicolini, our co-host, myself, and Mr. Rod Turner at Manhattan Street Capital, I'm JP Maroney. And if you're watching this episode of The Deal Flow Show or listening, you can get access to our episodes at thedealflowshow.com. If you think you'd make a great guest, reach out to us through the website. There's a way to do that. And of course, spread the word, and we look forward to seeing you at the deal table. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rod.
For more episodes, visit thedealflowshow.com and subscribe.